And we're back. Generations talking about my sports generations. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Steve. Hey, everybody. How we doing?
So that last episode was pretty heavy. And but we think that's part of the beauty of sports. And I think both Steve and I really believe that that's what part of the beauty of sports is and why we like it so much because it does bring a lot of different people and places together. And, good, clean competition is super, super fun. But we figured let's have a lighter discussion today. Let's just have a little fun, a little banter around. 2 weeks ago, Steve called Robert Ory a carpetbagger. And that's a great episode. Don't get me wrong. And last week was pretty heavy talking about kind of some of the social changes that took place during sports, because of sports, or in parallel with sports. But today we want to have a little fun. So Steve, you want to take it away?
Yeah, we thought today'd be fun to talk about some of our favorite players. And since this is about generations, I'm going to go first. And since we tend to talk about hoops a lot, I'm going to talk about three or four of my favorite players pretty quickly. But surprising to some of you, one of my favorite Lakers was Wilt. And, Wilt came to the Lakers, I think, in maybe 68 in a big trade. And he came and, everyone heard about him, how great he was. But the thing that I liked about Wilt was in the beginning of the 69 season, the eighth or ninth game, he blew out his knee. He actually blew out his patella tendon. And they're like, yeah, you're done for the rest of the year. Well, Wilt was back in 4 months. I mean, you tell Wilt something, he would do whatever he wanted to. And he's like, I will be back. And he led the Lakers. I remember I went to a playoff game that year. They played Phoenix in the first round of the Western Conference. Phoenix had Connie Hawkins. Phoenix went 3-1, and then Wilt just took over. I think he was getting 25 and 25 and did his thing. So Wilt used to say, "No one roots for Goliath," and it was true until people saw him as more of a human being when he hurt his knee and how hard he worked to come back. So he was a favorite, and I really enjoyed watching him play. I talk about a rim protector. It was just amazing. Wilt was a big favorite. And then, of course, my other favorite, aside from role players, but I remember vividly the day Magic got drafted, 1979. And I think this Pat Riley, but maybe even Paul Westhead. Well, I had a quote about Magic, and they said, when we drafted him, we thought we were getting a show horse, but we were getting a workhorse. And even though Magic was flashy and Magic was, ebullient and Magic was a great talker, Magic was a phenomenal basketball player, and he was a winner, and he wanted to win. Like he said, it's winning time. And I still remember probably the my significant single most basketball play I'll ever remember. 1987 against the Celtics. Lakers down by one, 6 seconds left. Cooper inbounds it to Magic. Magic faces up with McHale, drives and does his baby junior skyhook over McHale, Parrish, and Bird. Lakers win by one. Phenomenal shot. And that's Magic to a T. Magic was a great player, a great guy to watch. Of course, I had other favorites. I like a guy like Michael Cooper, a lockdown defender, things like that. But for basketball, for my generation, I'd say Wilt, Magic, and I was also a big Jerry West fan. All of this was before you were born, Jonathan. Well, not Magic, but certainly Wilt and West.
So my guy, which is going to sound funny because at this point, okay, it's going to be right after the ABA and the NBA merged. And you only got in Sacramento the Sunday, and this is after the regular season. This is basically after Christmas. And when the regular season of NFL is kind of ticked down. But you'd get a Sunday game for basketball on regular television. And that was it. And it was usually one of three teams: Lakers, Celtics, Sixers. That was it. It was one of those three, hardly ever changed. And so, of course, growing up in Sacramento, I had friends that liked the Lakers, and I had friends that, liked Larry Bird and liked the Celtics. And I liked comic books, and I collected comic books. And on the back of almost every single comic book was a Converse ad. And it was this guy dunking the basketball from across the court. Julius Dr. J. Irving. And so he was my favorite guy. And quite frankly, when I was a little kid, 7, 8 years old, so this is the late 70s, I actually barely saw him play. I can barely remember him really playing in those late 70s. And I don't really remember him playing until the 83 championship. But he was my favorite player by far. And it was mostly from the myth of just those commercials. And then, of course, they had the basketball, the Converse commercials on television with Dr. J. So he was my first basketball guy, Dr. J, even though that I probably, one, I missed the greatest part of his career in the ABA. And two, during his career in the NBA, you got to see so little of it because what the television rights were for basketball.
Well, the whole idea of liking someone you couldn't see was really interesting. I remember when the Clippers traded for Ron Harper. So you guys remember Ron Harper? He won a bunch of rings with the Bulls. But Ron Harper was baby Jordan right after Jordan. Ron Harper was this phenomenal player. He played in Cleveland. No one ever saw him. But somehow the Clippers traded for him. And all I'd heard, I'd never seen him play, but I heard this guy, Ron Harper's really good. I remember the first game I saw, there's a fast break early in the game, 3-on-2, and he's on a wing. And one of the Clippers threw it to him. It was a pretty bad pass, and he just reached behind him and grabbed it and went up and dunked in some guy's face. I mean, he was a player. But of course, the Clippers curse, killed him. Before he blew out his knee, he was a phenomenal basketball player. And I like Ron Harper because he's one of these guys that has an injury, comes back, changes his game. He's not a high flyer anymore, but he was a big part of the Bulls' rings. He could guard anybody, long arms, great defender, good rebounder, smart basketball player. So, but yeah, it's funny liking someone that you didn't know. The guy who played with Dr. J in Philly was George McGinnis, and I had the same thing. I remember this huge poster of George McGinnis that says McGinnis plays in Pumas, and I just liked the guy. I never saw him play. The first time I saw him play was the 1976 finals with Portland versus Philadelphia, which had a fight between Maurice Lucas and Daryl Dawkins, and Sixers went up 2-0. Then the Blazers came back and smacked them, and McGinnis had to guard Maurice Lucas, and Luke was 3 or 4 inches taller than him. And McGinnis was like, a power forward who wasn't that big. He was a big, stocky guy. He's probably 6'6" and a half, 6'7", but he couldn't stay with Maurice Lucas, and Lucas just used him. And I remember there were all these stories that, his teammates didn't like George McGinnis and all these things, but I always liked the guy, even though I think I only saw him play 3 or 4 games. It's funny how that works.
It's funny you bring up Ron Harper. So my friend Freddie, just out of the blue, loved the Cavaliers. And this is the mid to late 80s. So Brad Daugherty, Mark Price, Larry Nance, Craig Elo, Ron Harper. And then there was this guy, he kind of went to Cal. He got drafted into baseball and basketball. Oh, that's right. He went to the same high school as we did. Not during our same time, before us. But their backup point guard to Mark Price, KJ, Kevin Johnson.
He was on Cleveland?
He was drafted by Cleveland.
Wow.
And he tells stories of how he could not get on the court. That's how good Mark Price was.
Well, let me tell you my KJ story. So I went to law school at Eugene, Oregon, and I was a big basketball fan, and the Ducks were not very good, but they played at a great, they called it MAC court, for MacArthur Court, and it was loud and crazy. And I had a buddy who went to play at Stanford, and he said that when they played at Mac Court during timeouts, no one could hear what the coach said. The coach would be talking, and it was like it being on a Beatles concert. They just nod their heads like whatever. But anyways, I saw Cal play because I went to almost every basketball game. And Kevin Johnson was like an 18-year-old skinny little freshman. And the thing I remember about him was every time he was not playing, he was biting his nails. And he looked so out of place. But once he had the ball, this guy, I mean, I don't profess to be a scout, and I don't think I've got any X-ray vision, but I watched him play for 20 minutes. I said, this guy's going to be a star in the NBA. He was that good. And the thing I remember about him, he dominated the game, and then Cal was down by 1 with seconds left, and KJ had the ball, and he got trapped. 3 guys were on him. He couldn't get the shot off, and the buzzer ended, and the Ducks won. But Kevin Johnson was a phenomenal college basketball player. I mean, really good.
Yeah. So KJ, just because we went to the same high school, he went in the early 80s. We graduated high school in 90. So pretty much everyone was a KJ fan. KJ would come down and do camps. And, I was a late bloomer as far as growing. In freshman year in high school, I was 5'1" at the beginning of the year. By the end of sophomore year, I was 5'9", 5'10", and I would grow. I actually grew all the way until I was about 21 or so, and I'm almost 6 feet tall now. But I remember being 5'9", 5'10", meeting KJ, going, this guy must be phenomenal because he is just a shade taller than me. And the fact that he can dunk and how fast he is and how great of a shot he was. And he would come around and do camps and just warm up, just screwing around. And you were just in awe, like, wow, this is a real guy. He played on this court. He won city championships here. And man, he was just all world to us. So regardless, my friend Freddie wasn't a Cavaliers fan because of KJ. It just happened to be that KJ was there or got drafted by them. So he was super stoked. But yeah, Ron Harper was, he was great. And he goes to the Clippers, and like you said, he got injured, and then he became, one of the key pieces for those Bulls teams.
Well, it's funny. I don't know about you, and I don't know about our listeners, but I would have this. I wouldn't say it a fantasy, but I had this kind of mindset that if I was, 6'3", 215, I'd play pro football, pro bat, whatever it was. And so it was all about my size. Because I was a small, short, slow person, that's what kept me from thriving in the pro leagues. And then when I got out of college, I had some friends who had a security company in Los Angeles, and we did concerts and games, and we did Ram games, and I got to be on the field. And as the Rams came out, the last 2 guys were Tom Mack and Dennis Hara, the guards. But the 2 guys before them were Rod Perry and Pat Thomas, their defensive backs, and they were 5'9", 170, my size. And I looked at them, I thought, wow, I couldn't even play high school football. You guys are playing pro football, and they were great. In fact, if I can just take a little hog time, the single best play I've ever seen in pro football was by Rod Perry. And I've never stopped remembering this. And if I were a coach or a motivator, I would use this every time. So Rams are down by, let's say, 3 or 4 points, and Minnesota's running out the ball. And it's 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1. And if Minnesota gets a first down, the game's over. And they hand it to Chuck Foreman, great running back from Miami. And he bursts through a hole and takes off. So he's got the first down. Now it's just a question, he's getting a touchdown or not. And it doesn't really matter because the game is over. Rod Perry runs him down. Rod Perry runs 50 yards at full speed, dives and tackles him at the 5-yard line. Any other person I know would have given up and quit. And Rod Perry did not. And I was just like, wow, I've never seen a single better play in football. I mean, the game was over. It didn't matter what happened. It didn't matter if he tackled Chuck at the 5-yard line or not. The game was over. And Rod Perry did not quit. He ran him down from a ways away. And it has my overwhelming admiration for that's what hustle and desire and, of course, skill. He could probably run a 4.5 40 do. But Rod Perry and Pat Thomas, the same thing as you with KJ. I looked at them and thought, wow, I wonder what's my excuse for not being able to play high school football, much less pro football.
So you got to football, and my guys, those early 80s Raiders. And for those that forget, Stabler gets traded from the Raiders to the Oilers. And they trade Stabler and they trade Casper for Dan Pastorini.
That's a bad trade.
And I was devastated. Like, really? Like, Stabler, obviously the myth, maybe not obviously, but the myth of Stabler was greater than the reality of Stabler. Let's put it that way. If you can go look at his stats, and the game was played different, so it's hard to compare quarterbacks from the 70s to even the 80s or especially today. But the myth of Stabler was so great in the Bay Area. And I have some family members that were very seedy characters and did prison time, and either were Hell's Angels or hung out with Hell's Angels. So Stabler was like, people loved him, and that crowd especially loved him. And he gets traded, and I'm devastated. And the Raiders start off, okay. Passerini gets hurt, and then here comes lumbering out former Heisman Trophy winner, former Stanford pretty boy, former 49er and Patriot failure, Jim Plunkett. And Jim Plunkett has to be the man with the biggest head and the smallest helmet. And he takes the Raiders, and they win the Super Bowl as a wild card team. Kenny King, Mark Van Egan, Mad Stork, Alzado, and I'm in love. And those are my teams. And my guys, original Howie Long, not the version of Howie Long that everyone sees today, original Howie Long. But my two guys, Marcus Allen, and Todd Christensen. Those are my guys.
Todd Christensen was a great player. He went to BYU, and he's a running back because a buddy of mine played at Long Beach State and said no one could tackle him. He was that tough. But I thought he was arrogant as an announcer. I didn't like him. But Marcus was great. My Ram that I really liked. I mean, the old guy was Roman Gabriel. That was back in the day when that was in the '60s, and Rams were good, but they had to beat Baltimore, Johnny Unitas, and Green Bay, Bart Starr, and it just didn't happen. But the Rams were a great team. But in the '80s, we drafted Eric Dickerson. And getting back to your point of not knowing things, no one saw SMU play. I mean, it just didn't happen. I don't think I knew one person who had seen Eric Dickerson play when he came to the Rams. He was a number 2 pick. I have no idea who was number 1 pick. It was like, oh yeah, this guy. And we watched him. I remember he ran straight up. He didn't bob and weave. He was a straight up guy. And the Rams were okay. They weren't great, but they were good. And no one knew what to make of him. And I remember the Rams played the Jets in New York, and I think that was back in the days they played at Shea Stadium because they had the baseball infield, which was always fun to watch the guys get tackled on. And the Rams were playing, and the Rams never had very good quarterbacks, whether it's Vince Ferragamo or Pat Hayden. But anyways, they had a good offensive line. And I'll never forget, Dickerson destroyed the Jets. He got well over 200 yards, and I mean, everyone in LA watched like, wow, this guy is the real deal. He was so good, and it was so much fun watching him run. And of course, the Rams botched it. They traded him after 4 years, I think, to the Colts. But Eric Dickerson was a great player to watch, and he's one of these guys that I mean, he changed the game. He turned the Rams from being a decent team to being a close to a championship team. I mean, they had to play the Bears back in the day when the Bears were really good with Ditka and the coach and Buddy Ryan, and the defense that has 7 Hall of Famers on it. So I think back then the Rams had this guy named Dieter Brock, who was from Canada, and he was terrible. He was like Doug Flutie, but maybe an inch taller. And they just swallowed him up. But the Rams had Eric Dickerson, and he was a great player and very fun to watch.
85 NFC Championship game, Bears and against Dieter Brock. Dieter Brock just folds. All right, come on now. Eric Dickerson, 1983 draft. Who was the first round draft pick? 1983, the year of the quarterback.
John Elway.
The Raiders take number 26, Don Mosbar, USC center.
Now,
Long time.
Didn't Elway get drafted by a team he didn't go to? Did he get drafted by the Colts?
Got drafted by the Colts.
And he just said, I'm not playing, and they traded his rights to Denver.
And he got drafted by the Yankees, I think?
Yeah. So he had some leverage. He could tell them, hey, buzz off because I might not play this sport.
So here's those top 5. John Elway, Eric Dickerson, Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner had a decent career in Seattle.
Very good career.
Chris Hinton, offensive guard, And then, this guy was, when I lived in San Diego, I think his character is bigger than his game, but Billy Ray Smith, Arkansas, out of the Southwest, back when there was a Southwest Conference. How about those apples?
Yeah. Getting back to hoops, which is interesting. Were there players you liked that you never saw? So I was a big Wes Unseld fan. And, I saw, excuse me, I saw the Bolts play, who knows, 4 times, 3 times, but I liked his over two-hand overhead pass. He screened out, and he was a great player, and he was another one of these guys that was actually a high flyer in college, and his knees went out. But boy, a 6'7" center in the NBA, and no one messed with him. He could screen out anybody. He could get a lot of rebounds. And when he and Elvin Hayes were together, they had a deal. Like one of them would screen out, and the other would just go for the ball, and they cleared the board. So I was a big Wes Unseld fan, and I remember reading something about him. I'm not sure where he's from, but he was offered a scholarship at a high school to go to one of the real Southern schools, whether it's Mississippi or Arkansas or Alabama, to be like the first man of color to play on their team. And he's like, yeah, you probably got the wrong guy. If someone spits on me, I'm going to spit right back on them. That's just how I was brought up. So don't expect me to turn the other cheek. So he agreed, or they agreed, that it probably wouldn't be a good fit. But guys like that I've always liked. And I know you like the Larry Smiths and the tough guys who clean the boards. Did you like Michael Cage?
Oh, Michael Cage, Larry Smith, because he was originally, before he was a Rocket, he was a Warrior. So, those kind of guys, and Barkley, I love once Jay retired, Barkley was larger than life. And we were listening to, 1984, 1985, we started listening to LL Cool J and Public Enemy and Run DMC. And there's a line in a Public Enemy song where they're going to throw it down your face like Barkley. And, you just saw all these amazing highlights of Barkley. There's a play against the Lakers where Magic's going up for a shot, and he kind of does a one-handed, kind of almost like a floater. And Barkley jumps up in the air and just basically grabs it out of the air and palms it to himself, charges down the other end of the court, and dunks it just past everyone. But the guy that I really liked, that I never actually got to see him play, but I saw his statistics, and then I didn't get to see him play in when he was really, really good. He was still amazing when we actually watched him play. But if you ever noticed, all the jerseys that you see me wearing that are not a pro jersey have the number 30 on it. Do you have any idea who that number 30 is for? Have I told you this?
Is that for Steph Curry?
No, it's not Steph at all.
Who's number 30?
Well, he played at Tennessee with some guy named Ernie.
Oh, Bernard King, sure.
Bernard King, like the legend of Bernard. Like, you want to talk about Michael Jordan? Bernard King was Jordan before Jordan. And, it's well documented. He had, let's call it what it is. He had a cocaine problem. And those Knicks, those early 80s Knicks, apparently were a bunch of problem children when it came to that. But in the 84-85 season, he averaged 32.9 points a game. He was amazing. And then he had the knee injury, and he had to, change his game up quite a bit. And, we didn't really get to start getting, TBS wasn't a thing until after the 85 season. So we didn't get to see him until, the second half of his career. But he was just a guy that I liked a lot.
Well, it's funny because you're a big Sixers fan. And I alluded to earlier, I like Magic and Wilt and Jerry West, obviously, 3 Hall of Famers. Another guy I really liked in the Lakers is Michael Cooper. I'm not sure if he's undrafted out of New Mexico State, but he wasn't highly drafted, and he kind of came in and no anything about him, and he was a good player. But he became a lockdown defender. Back in the day, I mean, now they don't have lockdown defenders because no one goes one-on-one, but he was a lockdown defender. But the one guy he could not guard under any circumstance was Andrew Toney. Andrew Toney, the Boston Strangler.
Boston Strangler.
Andrew Toney could use anybody at any time. And but for, I'm not sure what it was, a knee or whatever it was, but for his injury, he was Hall of Famer. He was unstoppable. He was just amazing.
Yeah, Andrew Toney. You want to talk about like shooters, guys that could shoot and were just money? Man, that's Andrew. Like Andrew Toney was a much better version of Reggie Miller. I mean, the guy could play defense, and boy, that guy could shoot. But you're right. We saw again. It was all tape delayed, but the '83 NBA championships, Andrew Toney was the guy. And then even in the early, 84, 85, but then after that, he had his knee injury and he was done. But yeah, Andrew Toney, man, Boston Strangler, that guy was great. Michael Cooper, by the way, 3rd round pick back when they had 3 rounds or more, and he was the 16th pick of the 3rd round, 60th overall, New Mexico, from Pasadena, California.
Well, if we're going to stick with the Sixers for this moment about basketball, like I said, my buddies had a security crew, and I got to work a lot of games. And one of the games I worked was a playoff game, a finals game, Lakers Philly. And I was actually seated right in front of Brent Musburger. But I was watching the game, and the game before that, Moses Malone had just destroyed the Lakers. So there's all this talk that, we're going to keep Moses off the boards. We're going to deal with Moses. We got him covered. And I remember the first Lakers shot went up, or first Philly shot went up, and they missed. And 2 guys, Mark Landsberger and some other Laker, just sandwiched Moses. I mean, it was like a football play. They screened him so hard they put him in the front row, and I think wow, they're serious. And Moses got up and ran down the court. And second quarter is getting some rebounds. Third quarter is playing better. Fourth quarter, he got every rebound. I mean, he was a man among boys. No one could stop him. He was that good. He could do whatever he wanted on the basketball floor, and he dominated. He dominated Kareem. He dominated everybody. And he was far and away. I mean, Dr. J was on that team, but Moses was the man. Moses Malone was a phenomenally good basketball player. Underrated. I mean, because his name never gets mentioned, but he could play at anybody.
You think he doesn't get mentioned? I mean, Moses is amazing. So our basketball coach in high school, he had a poster. It was in an all-star game, and it was Kareem shooting a sky hook and Moses going up to, he doesn't get it, but the picture is at the peak of, the sky hook and Moses going up to try to block it, and how he's just shy of blocking it, and they were in an all-star game. I think the thing with Moses is everyone forgets he was a Rocket. Like, they were great in the late 70s or early 80s before he went to the Sixers. And the Sixers could not get over, those Celtics until Moses showed up. Like, they needed Moses. Like, they were, they weren't there. Talking about the myth being better than the player, the whole Daryl Dawkins thing. Like, we thought Daryl Dawkins was cool because he broke the backboard and he talked slick and he had all these commercials and different types of things. But, he was an okay player. But he definitely, the myth was better than what was on the court for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Let's switch sports a little bit. Why don't we do baseball? Because baseball, growing up, I was a little kid at the time, but my favorite Dodger in the 60s by far was Sandy Koufax. And, he was 65, 66, 67, phenomenal. And I knew a lot of people in the neighborhood who saw him throw a no-hitter. I never did, but they'd say, yeah, I went to that one, I went to this. He was just dominant, and it was fun to watch. And he seemed like a gentleman. He seemed like a good guy. Little known fact, he was a phenomenal college basketball player. He was a real good hoops player, but boy, it was fun to watch him in the 60s. 70s, the Dodgers are really good, but I was never a big fan of the Lopes, Russell, Say, Garvey gang. I liked them. They were okay. I liked Reggie Smith, Reggie Smith was a phenomenal hitter, great switch hitter, good player. Another guy, he wasn't from Compton, I think he's from Centennial, so he's from the area, and he was always one of my favorites. But how
Toy
about your
Cannon,
favorite?
man. Toy
Oh,
Cannon.
and I forgot to say this one because this was going back to football. One of my favorite Rams back in the day was a guy from Long Beach, who St. Anthony's, who the rumor was he dated the girl across the street, Notre Dame, Jack Snow, whose son has to be one of your
JT.
favorites, right? JT, big time giant.
Oh yeah. I mean, I like JT. This is kind of a different, you know, era, but I mean, I like JT when I first becoming a fan of his when he got traded from the Yankees to the Angels, and we were living in Long Beach. So I was watching JT Snow that first year. I think I went to like 30 some odd games. Like I've told this story before. We had the company had season tickets to both the Angels and Dodgers, and everybody wanted the Dodger tickets, and I would just go, every day, hey, those tickets available, and almost every day they were ready to go. So I was taking, my son Nathan, who was just he was a little kid at the time, 4 or 5 years old, and we'd go to, sat right behind home plate, 4 seats up, seats 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I'd go to the Angel games, and we'd watch, those early JT Snow, Tim Salmon, Darren Erstad, Garrett Anderson. You had Chuck Finley, Mark Langston, Jim Abbott. Those were some fun teams to watch. They just couldn't figure it out until a little bit later. But no, my guy, the first guy that I liked for whatever reason, because the Giants were terrible. Those late 70s, early 80 Giants team were not good. And so the bright spot was always Greg Minton. Greg Minton was like,
Wow.
yeah, Mr. Moon Man. But 1986, Mississippi State,
All right.
Will Clark, The Thrill, Robbie Thompson, like those. Will Clark's my guy. Like Will
Mississippi
Clark's
State must have had a good team because they had Rafael Palmeiro also, right?
Palmeiro, Jeff
That
Brantley, Bobby
that's a
Thigpen.
wow. Did they win the World Series? World Series? They should have.
No, they actually lost. I can't remember who they lost to. I'll look that up. But yeah, that was my team. And so you talk about things that I really remember. So there's two plays I want to talk to Will Clark about if he ever feels like we're big time enough. The first one is his rookie year. He's running down the line in Montreal, and Andres Galarraga gives him the business a little bit on infield chopper that Will almost beats for a base hit, but he's out, and he gets a little bit of the business from. And the Big Cat's called the Big Cat for a reason. That was a big dude. Like even in his rookie year, like he's a big guy, and it's not like Will Clark's small, but I mean Big Cat was called that for a reason. And Will separated his elbow in that play, and so he was injured, a big portion of his rookie year. And then a couple years later, Will's coming home hard around third base, and another big boy, a guy I just can't stand, Mike Scioscia,
Yeah.
gives Will the business at home plate.
Yeah, he's best plate blocker in Dodger history.
He gives Will the business at home plate and jacks up Will's knee and his leg. And I contend to this day, and I want to ask Will Clark this, I contend between those two plays, that's what turned him from a surefire Hall of Famer to, an all-star and a good player, and also why, his career was shorter than it could have been or should have been.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Scioscia could block the plate. Speaking of kids, you told me it's about taking your son Nathan to the game, watching JT Snow. JT Snow's best play by far was saving Dusty Baker's son from getting run over at home plate. Was that in the World Series?
Yeah, against the same Angels. Yeah, when he comes in, slides home, and then scoops up the kid because he's got someone coming in right behind him.
That's funny. That's very, very funny because that's a game-saving play, most definitely.
So
So
go ahead.
go ahead. No, you can go.
No, I mean, you were there at the beginning. The Los Angeles, California Angels of Anaheim. I mean, and I would contend, if you grew up in Long Beach, it's a lot easier to get to Angel Stadium from Long Beach than it is to Chavez Ravine. So, you like the Angels. Tell us, just tell everybody how and why, that came about.
Well, I lived in Long Beach, and if you just went up, I think it was Spring Street, and Spring Street turned into Catella. I could have my streets a little wrong, maybe Palo Verde, I can't remember. But yeah, you're 20 minutes from Angel Stadium, and you're also short right near the Catella Deli, which had good sandwiches. And in my junior, senior of high school, I must have gone to 20 games a year, and we tried to time it where we'd see Nolan pitch. And Nolan Ryan back then was amazing. And it was not uncommon. I have to look at the stats, and you probably know them or can find them. But I would guess in one of those years, I'd say half a dozen times he had a no-hitter going in the fifth inning, probably. I mean, he would mow guys down. And what we would do, Angels did not draw very many fans, so it was easy to get wherever you want to sit. So we would go behind the third base dugout right before the game started and watch him warm up. And the sound his ball made in the catcher's mitt was staggering. And it was just fun to watch. Now, those Angel teams were really bad. I mean, Nolan was like a 500 pitcher maybe. That's because they had no offense, they had limited defense. But boy, watching him throw was great. Now, by 79, 80, when they got good, I liked them. And one of my favorite Angels of all time was Don Baylor. They called him Groove, and he was, according to all accounts, a leader. I mean, he wasn't the best player. He wasn't a really good average hitter. I think that year he had a huge amount of ribbies, maybe 139. But if you watch the games like I did, every clutch time up, he came through. He was fearless. He would crowd the plate, pitchers throw at him, he'd get hit, he just got down to first. I think he might be the all-time leader in getting hit by pitchers, or used to be. And he was just a tough, no-nonsense guy that you could tell. I mean, it's one of those things. I remember reading a thing about the Knicks in the 70s, and Bill Bradley said, look, we're all really big adults, and we're, these big guys, but we feel so much better when Willis Reed's out there because we know no one will mess with us no matter what. Willis is that tough. And I got the same feeling about the Angels with Don Baylor. I mean, he came through, and that year he was phenomenal. And they had some good players. They had, Bobby Grich, they had Doug DeSenses, they had all these guys, but Don Baylor was the man, and he was just a really, really good player that I really liked watching.
Don Baylor. So I mean, he was originally
Oriole.
he was Baltimore. So he and Grich were both originally Orioles.
They were buddies, yeah.
And I know you like having this discussion, but by WAR, Bobby Grich had the better season, arguably, in 1979 than Don Baylor, and arguably should have been MVP.
Don Baylor called Bobby Grich disco because he blew out his disc lifting an air conditioner because he's so cheap. And as opposed to hiring a moving guy, he lifted the air conditioner himself and blew out his disc in his back. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen the stats, but Bobby Grich, phenomenal defensive player. I mean, arguably one of the best second basemen of all time, and a huge man. So, back in the day, second basemen were like, Walt Weiss or Steve Sachs or, 5'9", 165. And Bobby Grich was 6'3", 215, large man, broad shoulders, huge hands. He would turn the double play and no one messed with him. He was a really solid player.
And he's got several Gold Glove. Bobby Grich. So the two second basemen with the highest WAR, not in the Hall of Fame, are Bobby Grich and Lou Whitaker. And I contend that both of them should be in the Hall of Fame, because when you compare, and I've done a show on the Extra Time show on both Whitaker and Bobby Grich, their careers are as good or better than several other infielders, and probably the easiest one is Bill Mazeroski and Louis Aparicio. Those are probably the two easiest comparisons. But those guys were as good defensively as both of those guys, and both of those guys could hit. and Gritch had, like you said, Gritch had some power. But before I give it back to you, Mississippi State lost to the eventual College World Series champions, Miami Hurricanes, in 1985, and Mississippi State finished third.
No, that's a good run. Okay, switching gears again, and this might be a real curveball for you. I'm not sure you know this about me, and I'm not sure your knowledge about it, but even though I was a diehard fan and lived and died with definitely Lakers, kind of Dodgers, definitely Rams in the 80s, my team by far was the Los Angeles Kings. I was a huge hockey fan. Now get this, I do not know how to skate. I if I went to an ice rink, I'd have to hold the rail because I can't stand up on skates. So I have know nothing about it. But we learned to love hockey in high school. And if you think the Angels didn't draw much, the Kings were pathetic. I mean, back then the Forum held 17,005 for basketball and 16,505 for hockey. And the Kings would average like, 4,000 or 5,000 people. And so we could either sit right on the ice or way back. But eventually they got good. And the guy that made them good by far was Wayne Gretzky. And, this was back in the day when certainly hockey was not televised, so you really didn't see much of anything. But I watched Gretzky play for the Kings, 50, 80 times, who knows, a lot. And I've never seen a guy better. And talk about controlling a game. He was just, you watched him, you're like, wow, this is by far and away the best guy on the ice, probably the best guy who's ever played the game. And he would give the Kings so many good chances to score every game. They didn't always score because they weren't that good, but he was great. The other guy I really liked was kind of interesting dude. His name was Dave Taylor, and he was a winger. And he was interesting because he had a really bad stutter, so he couldn't speak very well, although he became the general manager of the Kings. But he's one of these guys that fit the mold. 6'1", 6'2", 205, good scorer, good player, but also good fighter. No one messed with him. Really good, solid guy, and he was my guy. But the one thing I want to say about hockey, and I don't know how much you watched it, because I know when you were growing up, San Jose did not have a team. But I've seen, a lot of games, and whether it's football or basketball or baseball, World Series, Super Bowl, Finals, NBA, nothing, I will say nothing compares to the excitement of an overtime playoff hockey game because it's sudden death. And you're watching this game and you're rooting for your team. And hockey, is kind of like a game momentum. Picture soccer, but on skates going fast, back and forth. And you get the puck, and your team goes, and if you score, the game's over. But if you miss, and it's a long rebound, the other team goes the other way. And watching those games was just breathless. And I know the NFL is very exciting. I mean, they've NFL and NBA are quite skilled at getting the excitement out of a game and last second stuff, and it's great. But boy, if you could bottle the emotion and the sheer intensity, passion, and everything about sports that's good is in an NHL playoff game overtime, because it is, I mean, really, you can barely catch your breath. If you're vested, I'm not saying just watch the game. I've never been to a hockey game, but if you're just watching a game to watch it, it's probably not the big of a deal. If you have a team in the game that you love, like I did for the Kings, I mean, I'm telling you, man, it was hard to watch. It was the kind you'd scream and yell, and you could barely catch your breath. It was great. But you're not a hockey fan, right?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because on the ramp up of the Sharks coming, all of a sudden we started getting, you could watch, they would have hockey games on cable. And so in a weird way, and I don't even remember how this happened, I became a Ron Hextall fan.
Okay.
Goalie for the Flyers.
He was a fighter.
And I think part of it was he scored a goal. And I thought that was just kind of cool. Like, oh, the goalie scored a goal. So before the Sharks actually started, but we knew they were coming, I just, oh, okay, this Ron Hextall guy sounds kind of cool. And I think I had, we collected sports cards, so I ended up getting, one of his cards. And I just oh, this guy's cool. He's young. He's just coming in the league. He was kind of hardcore, so you thought, that was kind of cool. But the Sharks before they'd even played a game, I went out and got a hat because it was like, oh man, this is cool. This is, I thought their colors were cool. I thought their logo was cool. And so I'd go sport their hat. And everyone was like, oh, you're a Sharks fan. And they'd come up to me, do I like hockey? And I knew nothing about hockey, like zero. I just thought, hey, we're finally getting a team in Northern California and I'll get behind them. And yeah, I just thought the Sharks are cool. There's old school pictures of me running around with a Sharks hat on. And I even had a Sharks, T-shirt. And then in '94, when they beat the Red Wings, when they were the 8th seed, and it was the first time the 8th seed beat a 1, and they beat the Red Wings, and Artis Urbe was the goalie for the Sharks. And so, I'm a casual Sharks fan, and I'm a casual, follower of hockey. And the Sharks had some runs where they were the President's Trophy winners, and they'd lose to the Blackhawks or lose to the Kings or lose to whomever over the last 10, 20 years now. So when the Sharks are good, I'm a bandwagon. I'll jump on, but I'm not a day-to-day hockey follower.
Well, what's interesting about Ron Hextall is he was one of the most aggressive goalies in terms of fighting. So back in the day, the gloves would be dropped and all the guys, the two fighters would fight and the other guys just grab each other. Every now and then the goalies would skate to center ice and grab each other. Every now and then, maybe 2 times a year, the goalies actually throw down and get in a fight. But Ron Hextall, he would fight players. He would fight like a defenseman or a forward. If they got too close to his net, he'd slash with his stick and they'd push him, and he'd just drop his huge mitts and start swinging. So yeah, he was a funny guy. But it's kind of fun to see where someone's so good they like tilt the field almost. That's what I was reading a article about number 11 on the Cowboys, the guy who's really good on defense. I can't think of his name right now. The linebacker
not Danny White.
Not Danny White, no. And
he's number 11.
he's not playing anymore. Anyways, they're talking about how good a linebacker he is, and Belichick or Parcells, one of those guys, saying, "Yeah, he's no Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor tilted the field. Like when he was on the field, everything went our way." And I felt that way about Gretzky. I mean, Koufax was like that because when he pitched, so he pitched every 4th or 5th day, he dominated, and so did Juan Marshall, and so did Bob Gibson, and so did Tom Seaver, guys like that. But hockey, Wayne Gretzky was on the ice like half the game, and he just, it was like he had something. And I think really, it's funny because you're trying to talk about good athletes. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the strongest, he wasn't the toughest. Whether he's the smartest, I have no idea, but he was the best. He was by far and away the best hockey player, probably of all time. Some people might say Gordie Howe, but I know for GOATs, there's a lot of discussion in the NBA and the NFL, and of course Major League Baseball. And you had a good show about who's better, Pete Rose or Ichiro, and you can look at the numbers. But I don't think there's much of an argument in hockey. I think it's basically understood that Wayne Gretzky so far was the single best player to put on skates, and he dominated games, and he just made guys look silly, and he was just fantastic. So watching that was a really thrill, and it worked completely for LA. It brought hockey to LA, and in a way that no one ever thought was going to happen. The famous joke was Jack Kent Cooke, who owned the Lakers and the Kings, thought, hey, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Canadians living in LA. Hockey's gonna be great. And then years later, he said, now I know why they all moved to LA. They hate hockey. But when Wayne Gretzky came, it was the whole star power. LA loves a star, so it's like Magic or LeBron or whomever all rolled into one. And he was fun to watch more than probably anything else. I don't really watch hockey that much anymore, but boy, watching Gretzky was pretty amazing.
So are you talking about Micah Parsons? Is that who you're thinking?
Correct, Micah Parsons, yes.
Okay, Micah Parsons, number 11, Dallas Cowboys. So here's the tiebreaker on why the greatest hockey player of all time is Wayne Gretzky. Over Gordie Howe, over Mario Lemieux, Yager, Sid the Kid, all these, Ovechkin. It doesn't matter. His nickname is the Great One.
Yeah, I guess you're taking it literally. He's the greatest.
they don't just hand out nicknames. Like, he didn't walk out and go, well, I'm going to call myself the Great One today. So I think
Well,
you win.
as you know, I've been lobbying for a whole show on nicknames, but what I think is interesting is there are nicknames that are clearly, like contrived by sports writers that obviously no one ever called Wilt the Stilt, or I doubt people called Jerry West Mr. Clutch, but Raiders probably called Matuzak the Twos, right? I mean, like, hey, Twos, you want to go for a drink or whatever? I like nicknames that actually are real nicknames that people probably get called.
So you're saying that Mad Stork, hey, Mad Stork, get over. You think Ted was like turned around and looked? You don't think I'll tell you what. Here's the best nickname that the player hated: Slim Reaper, Kevin Durant. Like, I think that
Yeah.
is just. I think that's pretty good, and he hated it. He said, "No, don't call me that."
Yeah, that's a terrible nickname. I mean, but those, I mean, like Magic, Magic was called Magic in high school. And I remember I read an article about his mother saying, don't call him Magic. That's just too much pressure. And I remember vividly my second year of law school. I was the only Laker fan of our friends. Most of the friends were Blazer fans. That's there. And then there's one of the years that the Lakers lost early in the playoffs, and they were somewhere, and they sent me these postcards calling him Tragic Johnson and all this stuff. Magic is a big, that's a big load to live up to, but he did it. But people called him Magic. I can't see someone saying to Kevin Durant, "Hey, Grim Reaper, let's go get a pizza," right? No one's gonna do that.
Slim
Slim,
Reaper.
Slim Reaper. Okay,
I
excuse me.
mean,
I missed that.
I think you're right. I mean, some of these things are contrived, or the ones that, Will the Thrill, he was called Thrill for quite a while. It wasn't like something that he called himself or anything like that. Of course, his first at home, hits a home run off Nolan Ryan. So
Do you think people called Al Hrabosky the Mad Hungarian? Hey, Mad Hungarian, let's go get some food.
you know,
Probably not.
back then, who knows? Like today, not, but I mean, that would have been what, like 76, 77. I mean, he was originally what, a Cardinal?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, how about the Bird, Mark
Oh, the
Fitter?
bird. They may have called him the bird. I don't know. I mean, that to me is borderline. That to me is one of those things where maybe they did call him Hey Bird, and I get that, but some of these nicknames are so contrived and so obviously non-usable that I think it's funny. And I will continue to lobby for a full show on nicknames at some point in the future. But our future is pretty bright, and we're rolling towards that very big party that I've been alluding to for weeks now. And all we're waiting for is for that fourth number to pop up. And once we get 1000, we will be telling you about where and when. And even if you're in Europe, we're not going to pay for your flight, obviously, but come in and we'll tell you where it's at, and you can have a couple slices of pizza and chat with us and tell us your thoughts on the show.
Also, a preview for everybody. Due to technical reasons and a lot of logistical reasons, we've been playing a man down. So we called this Generations, and you only really have two generations. And the two generations that you're getting are the two oldest generations that are still living. Let's just call it what on average, right? There's some silent generation people out there, but they don't want to put up with this nonsense. But we believe, and we will have it sorted out here very soon, but the third leg of the stool will be joining us in the next few episodes. So we will let you know when that happens. We're super excited. There's been a lot of logistics and technical pieces that we've had to work through, but the third leg of the stool will be joining us hopefully very soon.
And if he does join, without too many spoiler alerts, it won't be such a West Coast bias. There'll be some East Coast bantering around, and we can hear stories about Yankees and Knicks and Celtics and everything else. It'll be a little more East Coast flavor, which will give our show, that much more cred, because now it's a nationwide show. Right now, it's basically Giants, Dodgers, Lakers, Golden State, with a few other things thrown in. But if our third man comes in, it's going to be beautiful.
But one last round, like, who do you like watching today?
In what sport?
I don't care. Pick one. Football, baseball, basketball, the hockey if you like.
Well, I don't watch hockey anymore, so I can't really say that. I really enjoy um, watching Patrick Mahomes on in football. I'm not a Chiefs fan. I've never been a Chiefs fan, but there is something to be said about a guy who's that good. And I have a friend who calls him the Michael Jordan of football. He might be not far off. The things he does is pretty amazing, and it's fun to watch. Basketball, there are a lot of guys I really enjoy watching LeBron. I've always liked watching LeBron, and that's it. Baseball, baseball, the playoffs. I'm not really watching that much anymore. I would like to see when. I mean, I will say if I'm in a room and Bryce Harper's at bat, I will drop him doing and watch it because he's got that magnetism, that juice, that everything else. So I like seeing him play. I like seeing Trey Turner play, but the the main thing for me, I think, right now is basketball, and I like watching a lot of different guys. Unfortunately, I don't enjoy watching the Clippers that much, even though I root for them, but they've turned into a very kind of dull team, and I don't exactly know why. But how about you?
I mean, of course, the Warriors. I mean, this run has been amazing, and this is better than, of course, the Run TMC years. This is, better than the early 2000 Kings. When you had Doug Christie and Bibby and Weber and those guys. This has just been so fun, and those guys. When you watch a Warriors game, whether you like the Warriors or not, you can hate the Lakers or the Warriors. I don't mind. I like finally having the team that everybody hates. But the way they play basketball and the way they force other teams to play basketball, it's beautiful. And when you watch, you're right. When you watch the Clippers, how their offense is so stagnant, the ball doesn't move, it's just too much one-on-one. I don't like that style of play, but with the Warriors doing moving quick, passing to the open guy, I like that. And any of the other teams that do that style of basketball, I love to watch. Baseball, I didn't watch a game until I was in Baltimore and I watched a couple of the wild card series, just, the Twins, and that was really amazing to see them win, and then they get bounced. That was too bad. I wanted the Orioles to win. They sounded and looked, super exciting. And then football, I don't know. I'm ready to give up on the Raiders. I don't know. It's more teams now, are not teams but players. And I tell you what, my fantasy team is rolling, and I got a lot of Dolphins, and the Dolphins look fun. They just look fun. Now you could hate them or whatever, and they've got a couple of guys that have some former legal issues, so that always is a little bit of a challenge for me. But watching them play football and how they're doing it, it's like they're the Warriors of football. So I don't know. That's what I've got rolling so far.
I will say that one thing the NFL has kind of done really well, which is a very backhanded compliment. They've made the games very boring, and that's why I think you like the Dolphins. And I like Mahomes. They break out of the mold and they try things different, and it's pretty fun. And I think the big risk of these leagues is how to keep the game it's interesting, how to keep it going. Baseball made some rule changes. I read something that basketball is tweaking with how the regular season's going to go. I haven't really read up on it, but yeah, I mean, look, sports is sports, and it's fun and it's exciting and it's fun to watch your favorite players. And I think we talked about this last time. I like adversity. I like guys who get knocked down and pick themselves up and suck it up. And I mean, the classics, a guy like Frank Tanana, fireballer in his 20s, and all of a sudden he blows his arm out, so he becomes a junk ball pitcher very effectively. And I like the Ron Harpers who blow out their knee and come back and play hard. I mean, that's why I liked Wilt. So yeah, sports has all the stuff, and it's going to keep being fun to watch, and gives me a lot of pleasures in this increasingly stressful world.
I hear that. All right. Well, we want to thank everybody. Thank you for the listens. Thank you for following. And if you're not following, please follow, share with your friends. We're racing to 1,000, so we're having a a grand old time, and we really enjoy this, and we're doing this out of passion and out of fun. And we can't wait for our third member to join us. So thank you very much. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Steve. Thanks again.